Letting me come and talk to you guys. Today I'm talking about putting the games back into games. I've had a lot of conversations over the past year, really, about what is Web3 gaming, what do these games look like, and many of you have talked to me about your concerns, your interests with these games. I love the games that are on Avalanche right now and in Web3. But I also think there's a lot of room for improvement, for the next levels of development, especially as we bring new people into the space. Our project is Infinity Keys. It is a stealth Enigma project right now. We will have more information for you, a little bit more, at the end of this presentation, talking a little bit about what it is. I won't do too much. My technical co-founder is in the audience, and if I reveal too much, he'll come and get me. So we'll have much more coming out later this year. But for now, we're going to talk about gaming. My history, I am a former games professor. I got my PhD in communication, media studies, social science, where we looked at game mechanics and how people learn from the mechanics of games as opposed to the content. So you're welcome to look up my publications. They're online. You can go Google Scholar them, cite them. I don't have very many citations, so feel free to write your own papers and use them. But I was always very interested in what are the mechanics of the games that we play. There was always this hypothesis in video game violence. That's kind of the world I came up in academia, that if you see something in a video game, maybe you'll learn that thing in a video game. And I always thought that was total crap and just never made sense to me as a gamer. What I learned from playing World of Warcraft, any WoW players in here? Was my shot rotation, right? You know your shot rotation, you know your mana conservation, and when you pop a pot and all that sort of stuff. And that's what I learned, right? These were like hardcore, ingrained mechanics. And so thinking about those mechanics as educational tools also informed a lot of game design. How do you make good games? What do you put into them? It's not just animated bits and bobs and cool stuff. It's not just giving people badges and awards for doing certain tasks. There's actual mechanics of gameplay that we need to build as well. That's what I'm going to talk about today. So let's start talking a little bit about game design versus fun design. Game designers, game publishers want you to have fun. That is the goal, but you can't design fun. You can think of things that are fun, but you can't just like manufacture fun. What you do is, fun is an emergent experience. Fun emerges from engaging in other kinds of experiences. So when it comes to actual game design and designing experiences that are fun, that are engaging, what you do is you create the rules, you create the system by which people can participate, and then fun emerges. Right? So we don't create fun. That's one of my sort of principles here is fun is hard to create. In Web3, those of us who are building games on Web3, on Avalanche and other EVM or other blockchains, we're now in the business of engagement. This is the attention economy, right? This is how things have changed. It used to be, you could sell ads. Really, you're fighting for people to spend time on your platform. And so that's what we got to do. We got to think about how do we build emergent experiences that engage people, that keep them fun. I think about designing these as codified affordances. I'll get into this. I'm an academic, so here's my definitions. Codified affordances that create space for fun to emerge, which means we really have to understand the rules of the game. The rules of the game really matter, and that's how thing emerges. When you have rules, when you have these experiences, then fun emerges. And there's good research on this. Fun emerges through overcoming challenges. Fun emerges through engaging in competition. Fun emerges by exploring fantasy. It emerges when you experience arousal and when you engage socially. Those are some of the chief reasons people to go and play games. And when they fulfill these objectives, when these things happen, then those are engaging, fun experiences. Hey, everybody, come on in. There's room in the front, too. Splash zone. I sometimes spit when I talk, so watch out. So how do you design these rules? These are game mechanics. And the rules of the game, they vary from game to game. On the slide right now, I've got the gravity in Mario. And there's actual research on this, you can Google this up, where people have looked at the different sort of gravitational pull on Mario and mapped that out for different games and different curves and how that works. Now, as a player, you typically don't like think about the actual physics and the equation of gravity in a game. Rather, you get a feel for it. You like get in tune with it, and so you can do things in the game that take advantage of the physics of the gravity. Now, gravity in Mario is just one of those rules, one of those experiences, but that's a good example. My other example is popular game in America is Monopoly. Anybody Monopoly players? I almost lost a very significant relationship with my significant other because I know the rules of Monopoly and my partner did not. She played house rules. And so most of y'all probably played house rules. House rules lead to bad fights, horrible breakups, like this whole thing. If you play by the actual rules, read the game, it's actually quite a different experience. How long does Monopoly take to play? Quick quiz. It's a 45-minute game. People are used to playing it for like, days in a row. It's a 45-minute game if you play by the rules. The rules of the game, and when you adjust those rules, it changes the experiences. So we're going to think about these rules and these mechanics, or as I've defined it here, the particular components that provide players possibilities for action within the game. It makes us have to ask this question: what are the game mechanics in our favorite Web3 games? Game designers, here's game design tip number 1. Use existing mechanics to build familiar games. So if you want to build a game that people know how to play, you use mechanics that they already know. You see this in first-person shooters. First-person shooter I played was Wolf 3D. It was shareware in 7th grade or something like that, 8th grade. And then Doom, you had to like get a shareware copy and a crack in MS-DOS. Yeah, rep. And those sort of set the stage for the mechanics. And then Bond comes out, really takes over and defines these. You use these existing mechanics to bring players along and make familiar experiences. And Web3 has done this. In fact, this is most of Web3 gaming so far, although not with shooters or action games. We'll see it in a while. And to be fair, this is not just Web3 gaming. This is most of AAA gaming. This is most of what people do is there's an existing genre, there are existing mechanics, you replicate those and then put your own spin on it so you pull other players in. But in Web3, most of these mechanics, they look a lot like this. They're DeFi mechanics, right? These are the game mechanics in many of the games we see today. And shout out to, especially on Avalanche, Crabata, Pizza. I got my chicken homeboys in the back. I'm in Hoppers. Like, I love these games. They're great, they're fun, they're engaging. But the mechanics are DeFi mechanics. What are DeFi mechanics? These are things that we've known for the past couple of years or longer. It's pools. We pool funds together. We use smart contracts to retain ownership. We can do what we want with them. There's staking, right? You give up some freedom for the sake of some other benefit. We've got some token supply. There's yield percentages, and then therefore optimization is what pool do you go into and whatnot. There's competition and risk, and this is finance, right? This is decentralized finance. This is finance more broadly. We take these mechanics and we put frogs on them or chickens on them. And seriously, this is not a critique of these games. It is an observation of these games. Like I told you, I'm in Hoppers. I think it's great. But what it does, it's the same list of mechanics, right? But we got breeding, which is really like a version of staking, some different kind of gambling mechanism, or whatever happens to be in your favorite one of these, on Avalanche or whatever chain it is. So what this does is it borrows mechanics from DeFi, and it replicates them in a gaming atmosphere with cartoon fuzzy animals. And that brings DeFi people over to NFT games, right? Which is great. That's what you want to do in many cases. But that severely limits the amount of people that you can bring over in a familiar experience, right? My mom does not get this stuff. And so it does not matter if you put her favorite hobby on top of here, whether it's frogs or not, she's not coming to play these games because this is a set of mechanics that we know through other experiences. Now, not everybody in this room, but a lot of people in this room have probably been in DeFi and pools and know what an LP token is, what's the difference between an SLP token and an LP token, and some pretty esoteric stuff. Changing a network on MetaMask is a really complex task. You really have to, you don't think about it now because you're like, oh yeah, I just flip over. Hoppers just asks me to switch on their own. But really understanding like what you're doing, you're going from this set of validators to this set of validators is a pretty complex task that you've got to get comfortable with. And that's after you're like comfortable with private keys and what are assets and is this whole thing a scam or not? Like there's a lot to get through to get here. And like I said, these are great experiences. They're great games. But we don't know yet if, one, they will be able to attract a lot of different people in. And I hope they do. I would love that. That'd be fun. But it is a familiar transition to those of us in the space. It also remains to be seen if these mechanics as a game are long-term sustainable. For DeFi in general, right, there's this sort of Ponzi question, is like, how much are we building that where people need to buy in to, not just financially, but like in terms of understanding and participation for this to be a self-sustaining project or process. And this may be that. DeFi may do that, and Hoppers and Chicken and all these may do that, but as a game, how long is that fun? There's this question about, do I want to, something that's fun, do I want to go and do that for work? Do I want to make my living doing something that's fun? I don't have the answer to that. I think that is a complicated question, but I do know when I played WoW and I had to go farm my dailies so that I could go raid later that night, that got old. Right, that got old pretty quick. Now I was paying to do that, which is a little bit of a difference in this model. But there are some really interesting questions that we need to explore. That, frankly, if I can be honest, we just need time. We need time in this industry to see how these things shake out and how they go. People are coming in. Welcome everybody. I love this packed crowd. I see my friends in the audience. All right, people are coming. My name's Andy. If you guys are just coming in, my name's Andy Boyan. I'm with Infinity Keys, and we're talking about game design in Web 3. Get a sip of water here. All right, game design tip number 2. So game design tip number 1 is use existing mechanics and then replicate those and build them in a new way. Another approach you can take is to use metaphor to define and refine your game mechanics. This is not using existing mechanics. This is coming up with your own mechanics. And this is really what I want to talk to this audience about, is how do we build new games? And it's not as hard as you think. It does take work, and it's not a slam dunk. If you use mechanics that you know work, you can pull over an audience. And so there's a little more guarantee of something that'll work. So games like this are harder to pull off, but we do have very good evidence that these work. Metaphors help us design emergent experiences. And so I was thinking about this, and I wanted to, since it was a workshop, I wanted to actually design a game in front of you. I have pre-planned this. This is not all off the top of my head, but I did do this in like one 10-minute sitting. I thought of this. I tried to think of what's something boring, and I was like, rocks are boring. Like, yeah, frogs are cool, and pizzas, all this, you know, action lasers. No. What's the most boring thing I could think of? Rocks. Okay. So we're going to do some game design. What can you do with a rock? Anybody? You can throw a rock. You can collect it. You can break it. You can skip it. You can roll. Can you stake a rock? No, it's a rock. I'm talking about a real world rock. You can't stake it. So I'm differentiating right now between the last model where we're using familiar mechanics. We're not doing that. We're building a new game. And with an actual physical rock, you can do all this stuff. So those are all interesting, exciting things. The most boring thing is to roll it. You just roll a rock. Probably not this one, but you roll a rock. Okay, so we got a rock. We can roll a rock. All right, that's interesting. Okay, let's make it a little more interesting. You can roll a rock down a hill. Okay. Now we're getting a little action here. Rolling a rock down a hill. What do you do? What can you do? Like, how do we game rolling a rock down a hill? Well, you do it with somebody else, and you see who gets closest to a pin or a hole or something like that, right? Oh, hey, look, we got a game. We get together, we each get a rock, we roll it down the hill. Whoever gets closest to the pin gets points or wins or something like that. We invented a game. It's the rolling a boring rock down a boring hill game, but we did it. And hey, look, when we do that, one, we don't have any token mechanics or supply or yield curves or any of that stuff. But we do have mechanics, and we can look at that activity and pull out what we actually need to codify into the game. We need rock weight and material. There's some sort of friction between the rock material and weight and the hill terrain. We could have some sort of weather impacting rolling dynamics, and we could have the roll itself. How much force do you put on? There's a bunch of other sort of things here, but these are 5 pretty good ones that we can start with. Now, what do we do with these mechanics? Those engineers in the audience are like, well, we code the gravity, we code the friction, we code this into the system. Yeah, we can. You can build like an action game out of this. You can make it 3D in a metaverse. You got to put on the helmet. You can make it 2D, like a mobile side scroller. You can make this a card game. Any tabletoppers in the house? You roll some dice. Yeah, my man. You roll some dice for, how hard you throw it. You get a strength bonus for your toss. But this doesn't have to be a digital game either. Now that we know the mechanics of the game, we can design whatever game we want. Now, I would play this game. I might not play this game a lot, but I play this game with my kids. Like, I'd play this game out here, like get together, play a few rounds. That could be fun, and that could be interesting. Here's what I really like about this approach. We now have a game, and we haven't touched tokens, we haven't touched blockchains or Web3 at all. But just looking at this, how would you turn this into a Web3 game? What could you do? Ideas? You got rock NFTs. You got a rock, and it has properties, it has weight, it has material, and so you can own that. The value of that and the uniqueness of that is directly related to the mechanics of the game in which you do some action, as opposed to getting speculative value and then staking it and pretending it's rolling down a hill and things like that. Again, those are great games, but I don't know that they're necessarily games. They're interesting, fun DeFi protocols to me. This is a game, and that's the difference. So we can do a bunch of this stuff. We could even take the terrain, right? We could sell land. You can make the terrain different pieces of land in a hill rock rolling metaverse. That sounds like a terrible, boring game, but still, you could do it, right? Feel free. This is open source. Somebody want to go build this game? You credit me in the credits, but let me know. You could even do a roll, right? You get different arms. Big beefy arm there. You get one big beefy arm, and you could roll whatever you want. You could in fact use fungible tokens to you got to plug in tokens to do a roll or to do a redo. There's a whole bunch of other stuff you can do with Web3 related stuff on top of this game. And a lot of times when we talk about games and the opportunity for NFTs and gaming and Web3 gaming, this is actually what we're talking about. And I'm getting a lot of nods in the audience. So if you're feeling moved by the spirit, as they say, just let me know. Letting you know you're not alone. How am I doing on time? Very good, she says. I better check it. Oh, plenty of time. So I've got a few takeaways. I talk fast. I apologize to non-native English speakers, but I get excited about things. We've now designed a game without tokens, without ownership, without yield or staking, and we're building that stuff around the game. There is room to do this. So a couple of takeaways that I just kind of want to pull out and think about in this discussion. Game design, hold on. In order to build fun, emergent experiences that speak to broader audiences, we need to explore different models of game design. So this metaphor is one model of game design. My mom might play rolling a rock down a hill game. She'll be more likely to play rolling a rock down a hill than staking and yield curves and things like that. And in order to reach those audiences, we need to start speaking this other language. We get it. We're here. Like, we're the crazy ones. We're early. We're at the summit. We bought the tickets. We did the COVID certifications on every pass through to be here because we already believe we're a really natural audience to build for. But we're also limited. If we only hire and find users within ourselves, we're just going to be stunted, and we're going to go from one 3,000 person project to the next, to the next, to the next, and that's not a recipe for growth. To grow, we're going to need to expand to different models of game design. Now, that's not just for games. I think that's the same for DeFi and Web3 experiences in general, but that's a much broader topic. Be happy to talk with anybody about that later on. Here's another takeaway. This is a little bit of a pithy quote, but maybe it'll resonate. Game design is not necessarily game theory. We got game theory people in here who are thinking about how to balance systems, and that is incredibly important. You cannot have a robust token economy or community that's based on value that sustains itself without good game theory. But that's different than game design. Game theory is about maintaining a system and making sure the participants are incentivized appropriately and that those mechanics work. Game design is about designing emergent experiences that are mostly for fun or engagement, but those are different things. And so a lot of times people who are interested in game theory are also great gamers because you find the game, you find the optimization, you tweak that. Here's something, if you're like an optimizer, if you're like a theory crafter, I know Petty is back there. He's got his brain ticking on pizza and stuff. You need one thing you need to know. It's really important. The games research supports this. That is a small sliver of gamers. You are in a minority of gamers. People do not play games to optimize and like find the best outcome in Tetris. I do. I know how to beat Tetris. Like, I'm a Tetris insane person. That's why I'm in this industry and do this. But most people do not play games for those reasons. So yes, this just speaks again to that same point, is we need to build experiences for other people. It does seem weird that people don't like play games to beat them. Like, have you considered that? Most people don't play games to beat them. They play to have a good experience or to have a social experience, things like that. I played Guitar Hero back in the day. I think it was Guitar Hero 2 was my jam. Anybody else Guitar Hero? All right. And I played it with my significant other who became my partner. And she didn't care about the game. She just wanted to hang out. And I wanted to hang out and like beat Dragon Force and Expert. Like that was my jam. I never did. I beat the Slayer one, but I never beat Dragon Force. That was okay. That was okay. I'm comfortable with it. But different people play for different reasons, and we need to embrace that, and that needs to reflect in our design. Some of these things are not in my notes. They just kind of come out sometimes. Just because we like tokens doesn't make them fun. Tokens are not fun for most people. Tokens are terrifying. Crypto is scary for people. Is this real? Where does the value come from, right? These are some really common questions if you're interacting with friends and family that they maybe are too afraid to ask, or they do ask. Or like, how do you make money off this? Like, people ask some of these questions that we just kind of come to understand. Oh, it's a token. Oh yeah, it has value because it just goes on the open market and anybody can stake an LP position and provide liquidity on this blockchain or this blockchain if you bridge them over. We've just gone super calculus to most people, and most people in this room, I'm sorry again for how fast I talk, are able to follow along and at least know the basics of what I'm talking about. But these are not fun experiences. This is risk. This is financial risk and ruin for many people, and we need to be very careful about how we treat these assets and how we treat games that now have assets that have value. We're developing at light speed because that's what we crave. We want to see those advancements. We're ready for those next things. I want Hoppers is fun to me, right? I want Hoppers to go. It's super fun. And so that's what we crave. As builders, we do need to balance between what we want as users and what other users want coming in, or need coming in, I should say. How can we design good games as on-ramps to Web3 instead of the other way around? Good games can be on-ramps, and they should be on-ramps. Hey, I got more friends coming in. I'm seeing people. That's the core of this talk. I'm going to do a brief intro to Infinity Keys. So what is Infinity Keys? It is stealth. It is still an enigma. Hey, people coming in. But we are building a cross-game, cross-metaverse, composable metagame. Oh man, look at all that talk. But it incentivizes people to play your games and use your platforms. And we're starting with games first. We are building games that have affordances that speak to many of these Web3 platforms and infrastructures that you are already using. And we intend for that to be an on-ramp for people who want to play games and have familiar games, and then ease them into your games and your platforms and your experiences in DeFi and all of the things that the value that we know is in Web3. If you own your own assets, you have control, and there's decentralized validation of factual information, that there's high value on that. We got to get people in the door through experiences that they understand, and games are a great way to do that. We're building good games first. Oh, I already said all that stuff. And why? Well, there's treasure everywhere, if you know where to look for it. And we think, I think in particular in Web3, there's treasure in all of your projects in every one of these spots. And if we look for it as builders as well as players and bring those people in, we are going to find wonderful treasure. That is all for my talk. So I am going to wrap up and we can have some conversations about game design. I'll tell you a little more about Infinity Keys in conversations. If you want to come up to me later, I'll be around all day today. As well, if you want to come talk to me about any of the stuff that we're building. There is information online about Infinity Keys. I'll leave you with this. I'm not going to give you a link, but you got to go find it yourself because I like games. Yeah, and that's my presentation. I'll take questions. Well, so scholarships are really interesting. To me, this is it's finance. Is how do we loan? We're loaning people money, assets, so that they can do an objective and then they pay rent. That's what I see. So difficulty means a lot of different things. So one of the things you're talking about, like an Avalanche, running an Avalanche validator, there's a difficulty in getting 2,000 Avalanche, like AVAX. That is a barrier to entry. It's not actually difficult to get 2,000 AVAX. It's difficult to raise the money to get it, but like once you have the money to actually buy the AVAX, there's exchanges, there's processes you can get it. So that's one type of difficulty. It is in game design, like how do we build out scholarship sort of able things? That's a matter of infrastructure and some of the guilds proving out their use cases. I got hoppers, I don't want to manage them. This is true. I don't want to manage all of them. I don't know how to give them out. I don't know what the process is by which I can let people use those. So that's a matter of infrastructure and people building those systems. The other kind of difficulty is actually really interesting. It's a game design question of like how hard is the game? Are you Dark Souls or are you Mario? Bowling, right? You guys go bowling, you can put the rails up. Have you ever bowled with the rails up? Super fun. You have some beers and you can just like go whatever and do this. It's not difficult, but it is a fun experience. And that's really valuable. And if you're bowling with people who have never bowled before, put those bumpers up. Come on, we're not out here for ego. This is just like having fun, a good time. If you're playing for competition, then drop them down and a competition is the thing. So here's my recommendation on designing game difficulty. How difficult is it to complete or achieve the objective is know your audience. In most gaming, AAA gaming, you've got hardcore gamers, so you need to have super difficult modes and appropriate rewards for those hardcore gamers, probably a lot of people in this audience, but you've also got to have methods where people can experience the game with low stakes. I am terrible at like, what's the one y'all are playing right now? I'm terrible at games like Elden Ring, like Breath of the Wild. It was the first Zelda game I beat. It took me forever. Like I'm just bad at that type of game. But I want to experience the world. Like I wanted to do it because I wanted to just see what other people are talking about, and like I like the cooking music, and I think it's fun to do those things. I shouldn't be prevented from playing that game just because I like a different part of that game than the others. So that it comes into building experiences. Now, right now, we are in a place designing games where we have to be thoughtful about how many experiences we're unloading onto the builders, right? I can't, as a builder, we cannot build 10 games in one right now. We're building one game first. When we work that out, then we'll build additions for different models. So, the other component to difficulty is the reason the traditional games industry has done very well is they have done significant user testing. It's constant testing and iteration and design, not only for user experience, but for player experience. Everybody in the industry has done their time as a QA tester in traditional games, and you find bugs, you do wayfinding, you figure out this stuff, and when things don't work, They note them and they fix them. That's how to make successful games. Mobile games, it's been the same thing, except instead of extensive QA testing, they'll release it to the public, and then they read the comments. Like, oh, this game's broken. Fix, 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 iterate right away. That's really hard to do with token design, which is yet another reason to separate gameplay experiences and sustainable token economies, in my opinion. Yes?
Oh, hi. How do you balance the community, like the governance with the studio's like ideas for the game, you know, like where you're going with the game?
Man, that's a good question. There's this great Simpsons episode where Homer Simpson is invited to design a car. Anyone seen this episode? And he invents the greatest car. It's like got a bubble top, and it's got these crazy fins, and it's got extra cup holders. It's the craziest thing, and is the perfect car designed by the average man. And it's totally unusable. It is like the most, you know, it's super expensive. Sometimes what the user wants isn't what the user wants. So being honest with your community about that is important, I think. Transparency is going to be the answer here. Transparency, shout out, is being honest with your community. Bring in game designers. We have game designers that are going to help this. And so does the community want a feature? Okay, we'll take that under advisement and figure out how to do it. But sometimes there are really good reasons why you just can't let a community dictate the exact roadmap. I'm a believer in progressive decentralization and doing that balance. And I think we will get there in many projects. But in some places, it doesn't make sense. And in many places right now, it doesn't make sense yet. And so that's my answer is let's work that out. That's some of the mess of governance, right? Is like on both sides as builders and as community to understand like we need to have a conversation and not everybody's going to get their way all the time and be honest about that. And then that means a messy Discord channel sometimes. So people are pissed. But that's not just crypto though, right? Like you go to any of these games and they do an update in Hearthstone and you hit the servers or the forums and it's, you know, it's murder. You nerfed my thing. I, you know, did all this. So that's just part of the deal. Yes.
Regarding the tokenomic model, is there any way to be sustainable from both a company perspective and the consumer perspective where there's profit for both, where consumers can play and earn, but there's also a model for companies to make the game and earn for themselves?
That remains to be seen.
Okay.
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah, same.
I really hope so. I believe so, that is the case. And according to my thesis here, I think that's the difference between building a sustainable community that has important things to do, but also building a fun game that that requires input and design and things like that. But stay in touch. We'll see if we pull it off. I'm up on time, so if you guys want to come find me, I'll be outside, usually in the sunshine with a bubbly drink. Do I have one more? Time for one more? Or one more.
As a builder of this new kind of games, how to block bots so they can ruin the game for players and for the value of...
This is a very interesting question. I'm going to give you my personal opinion. Two things. One, there are many solutions that are looking to solve this. And whether that's decentralized ID or other forms of authentication, many people are currently building this. I just talked to some hackathon winners in line about this, and I know there's a lot of interesting projects like Rabbit Hole, Lost World, stuff like that, where it's a game in itself, but maybe there's some authentication of humanity in there as well. So I get hit up all the time by people who are building these solutions, who are talking to me about using them. So one, there are many solutions being built. Two, you can just think about that as a part of the game mechanics as well. It's like, what do I need human people to do that bots couldn't do? So CAPTCHA is one thing, right? You can institute some Web 2 sorts of things, and there's Web 3 versions of that as well. You can look at wallets too. Like, what does this wallet look like? Is it sketchy? Is it fishy? There's a number of solutions out there. Come and chat with me. I'd be happy to talk. Thank you all for your time. Again, I'm Andy Boyan. Find Infinity Keys